my channel, or welcome if you're new. Right off the bat, I will apologize for how my voice sounds. I am still recovering from COVID, so my voice is a little bit off, but I'm just rolling with it, whatever. So I'm super excited to film this video. As with all the videos in this series, they take quite a long time and a lot of planning, but today I'm back for my 4th installment in my Ultimate Thrift Guide series. I will link the playlist up here if you want to watch the other ones, and this is the second one in the Philadelphia series. So I put out another video, I think in November, that was part 1 of Philadelphia. Today is part 2. So basically I've been going all around the city to different neighborhoods and areas to create an ultimate thrift guide of all of the best secondhand thrift stores and vintage spots in the city. Part 1 was focused on Center City, so that was like Rittenhouse Square, Washington Square, Queen Village area. And then today we're focusing on neighborhoods that are north of Center City. So Old City, Northern Liberties, Fairmount, Fishtown, and Port Richmond. If you guys have watched my other videos, you know I always try to go to every single place and give you like a really thorough overview of every single one. There are a couple on this list where I tried to visit them, but they were closed like every time I went, or like I just wasn't able to go, but I'll still mention them and give you guys an overview of what they offer. And for all the stores that I'll mention, I'll give you the overview, tell you the vibe, what do they sell, what are the prices like, is there anything they specialize in, the whole thing. And of course, if I recommend it. And like I said, I try to include everybody, but I'm sure it's possible that I miss people. So if I miss your favorite store, please leave me a comment and let me know, because I always like checking out new thrift stores. That's kind of the whole point of this series. So if I left out anybody that you love, please let me know and I will visit them in my next one. I think the next installment will be South Philly, and then after that, perhaps West Philly, and also some of the suburbs, because there's some cute stores out that way as well. But in any case, we have 22 thrift stores in today's video, so let's just get started. So as usual, I tried to divide these into neighborhoods and structure the video in a way where, like, if you're visiting Philadelphia or if you're looking for places to visit for thrifting, most of these within the neighborhood are kind of within walking distance of each other. That's not always true, but I try to do it like that so like you can kind of figure out like where you want to go if you're using this video as a resource. Also, disclaimer, I say this in a lot of my videos, but I do live in Center City, Philadelphia. It's really loud outside sometimes. I've been sitting here trying to wait for like all of the noise outside to stop, and it's just not stopping. So I'm just gonna get through this as best as I can. I'm really sorry if you hear background noise, like this truck that's driving by right now, but we're doing it. We're just doing it, okay? So in Old City, the first place I want to talk about is called Jules Goldman Books and Antiques. This is definitely one of the most chaotic and interesting places I've been into. As you can see, the whole store is pretty much a cluttered mess. The majority of what's sold here is books and also artwork. A lot of the artwork is framed and it's kind of stacked up on the floor as you walk through. And then there's also a lot of stuff that's like loose pages or drawings that are just kind of shuffled in piles of paper, and you have to kind of go through it to find what you want. But that can be kind of an exciting process if that's the way that you like to shop. Some people are really into that. The store is really long, like it just keeps going and going further and further back. And like I said, it's mostly artwork and books and paper goods, but in the very back, there's a little room that has some more antique pieces. This is mostly like lamps and glassware, and there's some other stuff mixed in. So there's a little bit of other types of antiques, but most of the store is books and art. Definitely worth checking out if you've never been there. It's a super unique experience. Up next is Elektra Vintage. This is a pretty small store, but they have a really good selection. It's a lot of clothes. Pretty good selection of jeans, as well as vintage slips and nightgowns. They have a big rack of just all vintage slips. There's also a curated selection of home decor, some really beautiful lamps in this store. All of the home stuff is like very bright and colorful. A lot of the clothes are as well. It just has a very happy, friendly vibe when you come in, and everything is really fun to look at. In my opinion, a lot of the stuff is quite expensive for secondhand, so I've never bought anything there myself. I think I probably would buy something if it was like really special, but I always enjoy going in there and looking around. Next is a store called Stickball. This place is definitely more of a rustic kind of vibe. It was recommended and described to me as highly Instagrammable, which I think is true. When you first walk in, they have a pretty interesting selection of decorative objects, mostly made of wood or natural materials. And then there's a glass case that has like some jewelry and smaller objects. And then in the back, there is clothing, which is mostly kind of like masculine Western influence style. A lot of jeans and pants, also boots and belts. And then also back there, they have like some jackets and shirts and just mostly men's clothing, but there's some cool stuff in there for anyone. Personally, this place is not really my vibe, but I know that there's tons of people that love stuff like this. I've also seen some like utility type of clothing and like military style clothing in there. So if that's your thing, I would definitely check this place out. Up next, probably my new all-time #1 favorite store that I've discovered in Philly. It's relatively new. I think it only opened a couple of months ago, and it's called A 4-Foot Prune. I don't understand the name. Maybe there's a story behind that name, but I love this place. The owner's name is Kevin. He's really nice. Always enjoy chatting with him when I go in there. And when you first come in, it looks like it's this really tiny, kind of small, cramped space, but then there's a downstairs, and when you go down, it just keeps going back and back and back. So it's actually way bigger than it looks. And this place is stuffed full of the coolest items. It's very colorful and vibrant. There's always something interesting and unexpected in this store. Lots of like kids' toys and games, as well as just regular decorative items, things that everyone enjoys. And like I said, it just keeps going and going. So there's multiple different rooms filled with different stuff. The prices to me are very fair. I've bought a couple of things here that I thought were great prices. There is also some stuff that's more expensive, but I think generally that's stuff that's like a designer, has some sort of notable reason for the price. And the owner also turns over the inventory really frequently, like every couple of weeks. So every time I've been, there's always been like almost a completely different selection. So I highly recommend adding this place to your regular rotation because there's always new stuff coming in. The last spot I want to mention in Old City is called More Than Old. I almost missed it when I walked by because their sign is kind of old and faded, but on the inside is what I would describe as a really refined and elegant little shop. It's run by an older lady. I chatted with her a little bit and she said she had been there for many years. The vast majority of this store is glassware, tableware, and barware, so all of that sort of thing. To my eye, it's pretty expensive. I'm assuming that a lot of this stuff is like crystal or it's made by some sort of notable designer or something. I don't know a lot about that stuff, but I think for somebody who collects stuff like this is probably a really good place to look. The owner is really nice and willing to chat, but she also leaves you alone to shop, which I enjoy. Perfect balance with that. And for me, the store is fun to look at. There's really nothing that I'm super interested in buying, but I think if you're in the neighborhood, it's definitely worth popping in to check it out. Next up, I want to talk about the Northern Liberties neighborhood. There's a really cool store in this neighborhood called the Architectural Antiques Exchange. And this is such a cool place if you are looking for larger scale antiques and reclaimed items. I would say the main items that are here are stained glass, bars, like big wooden bars, and also mantelpieces. So this is like larger scale, true antique pieces. A lot of this stuff, from what I can tell, looks to be reclaimed from antique Philadelphia homes. It seems like a lot of it is original to the Philadelphia area, which is really cool. Some of the items have like little signs or cards on them to tell you what they are, what they're made of. So walking through here, it's just like a little piece of history. There's so much cool stuff in here. A lot of stuff is like stacked up and there's layers upon layers. So I feel like if you were really hunting in here, you could spend a long time looking. And everything is pretty expensive, but I think if you're looking to invest in like a true antique piece with a lot of history and character, this is definitely the place. Unfortunately, I have no space or budget to purchase anything at a place like this at this point in my life, but I love looking at stuff like this. I think it's so interesting, especially the stained glass. I think eventually when I have a more permanent home, I'm gonna try to incorporate a lot of stained glass into my space. So I love this place, highly recommend checking it out, even if just to look at it. There is another little store around the corner from them called Once Worn, and this is a pretty like standard consignment boutique store. Pretty average selection of clothing. There's a few nicer higher end brands mixed in. The pricing is pretty much what you would expect from a consignment boutique. They have like a little main level when you come in, and then it splits into upstairs and downstairs. So there's clothes on both levels, and then downstairs there are shoes. I thought this place was really cute. It was nice to check it out. I'm sure that if I was shopping, I could find some stuff here that I would want to buy. But to me, it's not like super special. Like I think if I didn't live in the neighborhood, which I don't, I probably wouldn't make a special trip out there. but if I was walking by, I would definitely come in and check it out. There was one other place in Northern Liberties that I had heard of called Lost and Found, and I tried to go there and it was closed. I think it might be permanently closed, but I wanted to mention it just in case it's not. There's really not a lot of information about it online, so I'm not sure if it's there or like exactly what type of stuff that they offer, but I just wanted to mention it in case anybody knows anything about it or wants to go try and check it out. It was called Lost and Found, but it might be permanently closed. I don't know. Okay, next I want to talk about the Fairmount neighborhood. Some real highs and lows in this neighborhood. So first of all, HomeSpun Resale Boutique. I found this place, I think from like a Google search or just something like looking on the map. And so I wanted to check it out for this video, and it was one of the weirdest and most uncomfortable shopping experiences I have ever had. I did not film in the store, even though I was planning to, like I always do, because the experience I was having was so deeply uncomfortable. I talked about it a lot more in detail in this video. I'll link it up here, but just like a little summary. Basically, the guy who like runs the store, I don't know if he's the manager, the owner, or just an employee, I don't know, but he was watching everyone like a hawk, which just made me feel super uncomfortable. Like, I don't know if he's concerned people are gonna steal or like, but I just felt like he was watching every little move I made, and it just made me feel like uncomfortable. Like, I just don't think people enjoy shopping like that. And then the other thing he did that I thought was really weird is that it seemed like he was trying to police like what people were looking for. Like, for example, at one point I was looking at a rack of men's jackets, and he came over to me and he was like, just so you know, this is men's clothing. And I was like, okay, thanks. Like, I don't need you to tell me that it's men's clothing. I know it's men's clothing. I'm still looking at it. Like, I might want to buy something. And then he did the same thing to this other girl that was shopping in there, and she was like, I guess because she was a small size or something, she was probably like a size 6 or smaller. She was looking at a rack of what he was saying was plus size clothes, and he was like, by the way, this is all plus size. And I just thought that was really weird to like watch people and watch what they're looking at and then basically tell them, like the implication was like, oh, this isn't for you. You know, oh, that's men's clothing or that's plus size clothing. And then the other thing that was really weird is that when I was looking later at the rack that he was saying was plus size, it was literally like size medium. So I was just like, the whole thing was weird. The guy was weird. It ruined the experience for me. Normally I wouldn't like go into that much depth about a place being a dud. I would just say, oh, it's not that great and move on. But like this, it was just, it creeped me out. Something about it just felt very uncomfortable. The guy also started interrogating me when I was buying something. I actually did buy something, and he was like asking me if I'm on Facebook and he's seen me before, and like the whole thing really bad, really uncomfortable. I don't recommend shopping in this store. The selection is not that great, and the experience was really weird, so I would skip this one. On the flip side, there's another store right around the corner that I had a great experience at. This place is called Uhuru, I think is how you pronounce it, Uhuru. I'm not sure how to say it, but everyone that works in this store is so nice. They're super friendly, really welcoming. When I first came in, they greeted me. They kind of left me alone to shop, which is what I prefer. And then when I had a question, I ended up talking to one of the employees, and she was telling me about all of the stuff that they do in this store. So basically, the store is mostly larger scale furniture, but I was talking to one of the employees and she was explaining kind of how the store works, because they're part of this larger like collective that does a lot of work in the community. They have programs that help provide people with food, with housing, with furnishing for their homes. I think they have events with like guest speakers and like all sorts of really fun stuff. So it just seems like they're doing a lot of good in the world, and they have a really cool collection of stuff in the store as well. So their staff member gave me like the whole scoop on everything they do. I left with a handful of pamphlets, and also I found out that they offer moving services, so I might have to call them when I move later this fall so that they can help me out. The one other store I want to talk about in this neighborhood, which actually just moved location, so I don't think they're in this neighborhood anymore. I think now they're closer to like Old City. But there's a store called the Modern Republic, which is also such an amazing space with really unique and funky modern style stuff. Lots of furniture, a big selection of really cool artwork. This was all filmed in their old location, so I'm not sure if it still looks like this, but when I was there, they had a really nice selection. Lots of like lamps, shelving, and then they also have a selection of smaller decorative items. This is another place that is kind of pricey, But again, I think like most of the items that are more expensive have some sort of like designer or maker associated with them that I don't really know a lot about. So I can't really speak to like why the pricing is like that, but I'm assuming there's a reason behind it, obviously. This store definitely has a style and a motif that they stick to, and they do it really well. So if you're really into that like funky modern style vintage, definitely check this place out. And now I need to go visit them in their new spot too. Okay, now moving on to Fishtown and Port Richmond. Of course, the first place I have to mention here is Jinxed Fishtown. I love Jinx so much. They have 3 locations around Philly, and it's one of my favorite places to check in on regularly, especially the location in Fishtown. I've literally never walked in there without finding something that I desperately wanted. One of my tips for this store is don't forget to look up. They have a lot of really cool lamps and light fixtures, so make sure you don't miss that. Look up, make sure you look at them. And if you're in the market for a new light fixture, this is definitely a good place to check. Otherwise, it's really a big mixture of all kinds of stuff like furniture and smaller decor. They have a little bit of clothing, books, adult magazines, basically everything you can think of. And this is also definitely a store that I would recommend walking through in different paths. Like walk back and forth a couple times, but take different routes, because I always tend to find something like when I walk through a different way that I didn't see the first time. The other thing that I want to highlight about Jinxed in all their locations, but definitely in this one too, is that all the pricing on everything is extremely fair. Like, I don't think I've ever once looked at a price in there and thought that it was too much or it was outrageous. Like, everything is exactly perfectly in line with like what I would reasonably pay for that item. So really well done to the person that does their pricing and their sourcing, because the items are beautiful and the price is right. Also in Fishtown is a store called Urban Exchange Project. They actually just recently moved, but they only moved like a block away from where they used to be. So if you are familiar with their store in the past, they're still like right around the corner. This is such a cool store with a really big clothing selection. So in the front of the store, it's mostly like streetwear and vintage items, some like higher priced vintage items. Everything is really cool. And then in the back of the store, there's a huge selection of like more run-of-the-mill kind of secondhand clothing, but everything back there is either $3 or $5. So if you're looking for a deal, this is the place. I feel like it's like Goodwill, but it's like kind of all the junk is removed. So it's like more curated than Goodwill, but it's the same prices as Goodwill. So I feel like they save you a lot of time of like having to sift through stuff that you don't want, because it's just really cute, nice stuff. The staff is also really nice and very helpful. So I feel like this place is really like the staple for cute, cheap secondhand clothes. And there's also some like really nice brands mixed in too, plus higher end vintage if that's what you're looking for. Right down the street from them is another store called Circle Thrift. I believe that this is maybe a small chain. I think it's similar to Goodwill, and like the vibe inside is definitely Goodwill. There's a lot of junk to sift through, but there's also cool stuff mixed in. You just kind of have to look through. The prices are also comparable to Goodwill. They do have one rack that's like a higher end clothing rack where everything is $15 each, which depending on what you're finding on that rack, sometimes that's an excellent deal. I found an Alice and Olivia dress at this store one time, and it wasn't even on the high-end rack. It was on the regular rack. It was like $3, which is absolutely insane. They also have a pretty big selection of home items, like decor. So during Christmas, there was some really cute holiday decor. I've also bought some glassware and other stuff for my house from here. So I think it's definitely worth checking out, especially because it's in really close walking distance to a couple other stores. So I feel like might as well pop in while you're there. They do have like a little second store. I think it's called like Circle 2 or something, and it's like right around the corner. But in my experience, the stuff that's in there is significantly more like junk-ish than the regular part of the store. So I usually skip that one and I just go to the main store. But I found some really great stuff here. Next, I want to talk about Thunderbird Salvage. Immediate favorite. I don't know how I lived in Philadelphia for more than a year without visiting this store. I'm so glad I finally made it out. It's absolutely huge and cavernous, and they have literally every type of thing you can possibly think of. Mirrors, furniture, lamps, art, clothing, decorative items, books, electronics, dishes, jewelry. It just goes on and on and on. They have really everything. A lot of stuff doesn't have a price on it, so you just kind of take it up to the register and the guy is like, $2, and you're like, okay. So it seems to me like you could kind of haggle about the price if you really wanted to. I've never had to do that because everything I've bought there has been super cheap. I think their prices are pretty good to begin with. This place is definitely getting added to my regular rotation. Such a cool store with really unique stuff. And like I said, you can find like basically anything you're looking for in this place. Also a weird amount of taxidermy. I mean, I guess any amount of taxidermy could be considered a weird amount of taxidermy, but they have a few. Next in Port Richmond is a store called Big Top Vintage. I really enjoyed visiting this store. It is really bright and colorful and vibrant. They have a good selection of clothing as well as home decor items, blankets, glassware, candles, and all sorts of things. Also, some really nice vintage sweaters are in here. I bought some really cute candlesticks and candles, which fit right into my little vibe at home. And the owner here is super friendly, and he was willing to chat with me and give me some really good advice about his experience starting in the vintage industry, which is something that I'm interested in for the future. So I really enjoy talking to him. And this store also does a monthly flea market on their street with like a bunch of other businesses and vintage shops as well. So definitely check them out on Instagram if you want to find out when their next event is. The last store that I was able to film at, although I am going to mention a couple of other ones that I didn't make it to, but this place is called Betsu Studio. And also another new favorite. One of my friends works here, and I'm so glad that I finally came to visit him at his new job because what a cool place. Really, really nice curation and selection of vintage items, mostly furniture. They have also quite a nice selection of artwork. The location is kind of secret and mysterious. Like, the building just looks like a warehouse building. I think a lot of buildings in Port Richmond are kind of like this, but it's a little bit hard to figure out where you're supposed to go. So you might need to call them and ask somebody to like come down to the door and let you in. They also do a lot of shopping by appointment, so you can make an appointment to come shop privately. And in addition to all of these super cool furniture, they also have a good selection of glassware and candles, although I think that these are like handmade or artisan made. They're like a more modern style, but really nice and kind of fit in with the vibe. And the owner is also super nice, and she gave me a lot of recommendations for other cool vintage stores to check out. So thank you very much for that. So those are all the places in Fishtown and Port Richmond that I went to in person, but I do have a couple that I just want to mention. These are all ones that either like have weird hours or they just weren't open on the day that I tried to go. So first is a store called Golden Bear Garage. They were closed when I tried to go there, but it was recommended to me. I've heard it's cool. Looking online, like on Etsy and stuff, it looks like they have mostly like sportswear, so like jerseys and hats and stuff from like vintage Philadelphia teams. A lot of it is like Philadelphia and Pennsylvania teams, but there's also other places as well. Maybe they're only open on weekends or like only certain hours, so I'm not sure. I will definitely try to check this one out in the future. There is another store that was recommended to me by the owner of Betsu Studio called Anything and Everything, and from what I understand, this is like an older gentleman who has had it for a long time, but it has kind of like erratic random hours as well. It wasn't open when I tried to go. The location, I wasn't even like 100% sure where it is, but I might try to check that one out again because she recommended it. There's also a store called Briar Vintage, and their website looks really cool. It looks like it's kind of like a haberdashery type of thing where it's like men's, like gentlemen's clothing. Their website says, I'm just gonna read this. It says gentlemen's fashion, collectibles, and oddities from the 1800s to 1960s. So that sounds cool. It sounds like stuff I would really enjoy looking at. That one I actually haven't tried to go there. It's like kind of up out of the way, ways away from some of the rest of them. So I've never even attempted to go to this one, but it looks like it's really cool. So I'll definitely try next time I'm out there. And then lastly, there's a store called the Thrifty Irishman. And the day that I tried to go to this one, I think they were closed because they were having their like employee Christmas party. So normally they are open kind of regular hours, but they were closed on that particular day. This place looks like it's really big. I've heard good things about this. I've had people recommend it. So it looks like it's kind of like a big indoor space, and then they also have a really large like outdoor space where I believe they do a flea market on the weekends. So I'm not 100% sure exactly what they sell. I think it is just kind of a traditional thrift store where it's like you never know what you're gonna find. But all of these ones I have heard recommended. I've heard good things about them, and I will definitely try to check them out as soon as I can. So that's everything for today's video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope this was helpful. If I missed your favorite store, please leave me a comment down below and let me know what it is so I can check it out next time. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss my next video. I am going to have more installments of Ultimate Thrift Guides coming soon. The next one will probably be South Philly. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!